Hello friends. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I was 12 years old when everything changed. My family had just moved to a small rural town called Millstone, Louisiana, a place so quiet that even the wind seemed hesitant to speak. My dad had gotten a new job managing a lumber mill just outside of town. He called it a fresh start. My mom said it was a chance to breathe. But for me, it felt like the end of the world. We'd left behind our old neighborhood in Baton Rouge, the friends, the noise, the bright lights, and traded it all for an old two-story farmhouse that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The walls groaned, the floors moaned, and the whole place smelled faintly of damp wood and dust. It sat on a large piece of land surrounded by dense forest. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away, down a dirt road that twisted through endless trees. When we first got there, I remember staring at those woods and feeling like they were alive, watching us, waiting. The first few nights were the hardest. The silence was unnatural. Back in the city, you could always hear something. A car horn, a siren, people talking late into the night. But here, there was nothing. Just the whisper of the wind through the trees and the occasional groan of the old house settling. At night, I could hear every sound, the floorboards creaking, the pipes humming, and sometimes faint footsteps upstairs, even when everyone was asleep. But what scared me most wasn't the noises inside the house. It was what came from outside. We had a golden retriever named Rusty. He was the friendliest dog you could imagine, always wagging his tail, always begging for attention. But out here, he wasn't the same. From the first night, he started acting strange, growling at the windows, refusing to go near the woods, and barking furiously at nothing we could see. The third night, around midnight, he started howling so loud that it woke the whole house. My dad rushed downstairs, shouting for him to stop, but Rusty wouldn't move away from the back door. His fur stood on end, and he was staring into the tree line like something, or someone, was out there. My dad went out with a flashlight, but the beam barely cut through the thick darkness. He came back a few minutes later, pale and silent. When Mom asked what he saw, he just muttered, "Probably raccoons." But the way his hands were shaking told me it wasn't raccoons a few days later. While helping my dad fix the fence at the edge of our property, I saw a man walking up the road. He was tall, thin, maybe in his late 50s, with weathered skin and gray hair slicked back behind his ears. He wore old jeans, heavy boots, and a plaid shirt that looked like it had seen better days. There was something about him, something off. As he got closer, I noticed his eyes. They were pale blue, almost gray, and sharp, like they could cut through you. "Morning," he said, his voice low and gravelly. My dad nodded. "Morning. Can I help you?" The man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It looked practiced. "Name's Marlin. Live down the road a bit. Thought I'd come by. Welcome the new folks." My dad wiped sweat from his brow and shook his hand. "I'm James, and this here's my boy, Alex." Marlin's eyes flicked toward me, studying me for a moment too long. Then, without looking away, he said, "Y'all be careful out here. Woods can play tricks on a person, especially at night." The way he said it made my stomach twist. When he finally walked away, limping slightly as he disappeared down the dirt road, my dad watched him until he was out of sight. Then he turned to me and said something I'd never heard from him before. "Son," he said, his voice serious, If you ever see that man again, don't talk to him. Stay inside. You understand me?" I nodded, but I didn't understand. Not yet. A few nights later, I woke up to a sound. Soft at first, almost like wind. But it wasn't the wind. It was a voice. Whispering my name, I froze. My heart slammed in my chest as I sat up and listened. "Alex!" It came again, low and raspy, from just outside my window. I wanted to scream for my parents, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at the window, my throat tight with fear. After a few seconds that felt like hours, I gathered enough courage to pull back the curtain. And that's when I saw him. Marlin. He was standing in the yard, bathed in pale moonlight. But something about him wasn't right. His skin looked gray, almost lifeless, and his eyes, those cold, gray eyes, glowed faintly like dying embers. He smiled, revealing teeth that were too white, too sharp. His head tilted slightly to the side, and he whispered my name again. "Alex." I stumbled backward, tripping over the bed. When I looked back out the window, he was gone. Just gone. I ran to my parents' room, yelling his name, telling them what I saw. My dad jumped out of bed, grabbed his shotgun, and rushed downstairs. Mom pulled me close, trying to calm me down, but her hands were trembling. We searched the whole house, every window, every door, locked. Then my dad went outside, his flashlight sweeping across the yard and into the woods. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of anyone. Just silence. The next day, my dad went into town to ask around about Marlin, but no one seemed to know who he was. There was no Marlin living down the road. No Marlin in town. No record of him. Anywhere. It was like he didn't exist. That evening, I caught Rusty staring out the window again, growling deep in his throat. When I looked, I saw movement in the trees. A shadow, shifting between the trunks, tall and thin. My dad saw it too. He grabbed the shotgun, but before he could open the door, Rusty lunged toward it, barking like he was trying to stop him. And then, all at once, Rusty went silent. His ears went flat, his body stiff. He backed away slowly, whining, and ran upstairs to my room. That was the moment my dad decided we were leaving. We spent the next 2 days packing, but that final night, couldn't sleep. The house felt heavier, darker. Every sound made me flinch. Around 3 a.m., I heard the whisper again. "Alex." I sat up, my heart pounding. This time, it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the room. The air grew cold, so cold I could see my breath. And then I saw him. Marlin stood in the corner of my room, his face half in shadow, his grin stretched unnaturally wide. His eyes were empty now, black voids that seemed to swallow the light. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. He stepped closer. "Why'd you come here?" he whispered, his voice low, echoing like it came from somewhere deep beneath the earth. I pressed myself against the wall, trembling. He reached out his hand, thin, bony fingers stained dark, like they'd been buried in the dirt. Before he could touch me, the door burst open. My dad stormed in with the shotgun, shouting. But the second the light hit Marlin, he was gone. Vanished like smoke. Only a faint smell of soil and rot remained. The next morning, we left Millstone for good. As we drove away, I looked back at the house, our short-lived, fresh start. The windows stared back at me like eyes. When we reached the main road, my dad finally spoke. "I found something," he said quietly, his hands gripping the wheel. He told us that after asking around again, one of the older locals mentioned something strange. Years ago, maybe 20 or 30, there had been a man who lived down that road. His name was Marlin Kane. He worked at the same lumber mill where my dad had just been hired. But one night, Marlon vanished. They searched for him for weeks. Eventually, they found his body deep in the woods, half buried, mutilated. Some said he'd gone mad and wandered into the forest. Others whispered that something in those woods took him. After that, no one bought the land again. Until us. I didn't say a word the whole ride, but I couldn't stop thinking about his face, the way he smiled, the way he whispered my name like he'd known me for years. I'm 26 now. We never went back to Millstone. My parents don't talk about it, and I've learned not to ask. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the world outside is dark and still, I hear that voice again. Alex. And every time I do, I look toward the window. Because deep down, I know he's still out there, somewhere in those woods, waiting. I was 32 when I signed the lease for that apartment on Maple Hollow Avenue last September. It wasn't fancy, just an old 4-story building from the late 1960s, tucked between a laundromat and a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon. But it had charm. Those hardwood floors that creaked like they had stories of their own, the faint smell of cedar from decades of polishing, and a small balcony overlooking the quiet street below. After my divorce, I was desperate for a reset. New city, new job, new start. I just landed a graphic design position at a startup downtown. Long hours, demanding clients, but finally enough money to live alone. The idea of waking up to silence felt like therapy after years of arguing through paper-thin walls with someone who'd already fallen out of love. When I met the landlord, Mr. Hawthorne, he was this sunburned, cheerful man in his late 50s who proudly mentioned that nobody ever complains here. He said the building was mostly older tenants, quiet folks who kept to themselves. That sounded perfect to me. My apartment was Unit 2B, a corner unit on the 2nd floor with 2 big windows that filled the room with afternoon sunlight. My cat, Milo, loved to sleep on the windowsill, tail flicking lazily as cars passed below. For the first few weeks, life was blissfully uneventful. I'd wake up early, make coffee in that tiny yellow kitchen, and sit by the window, scrolling through design ideas. Sometimes I'd hear faint footsteps above me, or the humming of someone's TV through the wall. Normal apartment noises that made me feel less alone. I met a few neighbors. A retired nurse named Joan on the 3rd floor. A college kid named Eddie, who played loud EDM on weekends. And then there was Carl. Carl lived right next door. He was probably mid-40s. Tall, but always slouched a little. With this heavy beard that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in months. He wore the same faded maintenance uniform every time I saw him, even on Sundays. The first time we met, he was standing outside my door while I was moving boxes in. He smiled, too wide, and said, "You must be the new girl in 2B. I'm Carl. I live right next to you. I help out around the building sometimes. Need a hand?" He said it like he'd been waiting for me. His handshake was long, too long, and his grip uncomfortably tight. I politely declined his offer and went inside, but something about the way he kept standing there in the hallway long after our conversation ended unsettled me. Still, I brushed it off. I was new. I didn't want to be the paranoid tenant everyone avoids. It began in mid-October. Small, harmless things. My coffee mug, the one with the avocado cartoon that my sister gifted me, went missing from the counter. I found it the next day inside a kitchen cabinet I rarely used. Then my phone charger disappeared from my bedside table, only to reappear in the bathroom drawer. I blamed myself. Moving stress, long work hours. Maybe I was just being forgetful. But then Milo started acting strange. He'd sit in the kitchen for hours staring at the cabinet beneath the sink, the one right against the wall that separated my apartment from Carl's. Sometimes he'd paw at it, sometimes hiss, sometimes just growl softly with his fur puffed up. At first, I thought maybe there were mice, but pest control found nothing. Then came the doors. Every night before bed, I double-checked my locks, deadbolt, chain, everything. But some mornings, I'd wake up to find the chain latch undone, just the chain, never the main lock. The first time, I told myself it was a mistake. The second time, I started taking photos before sleeping, just to be sure. By the third time, I had proof. In the before photo, the chain was locked tight. In the after, it hung loose. I couldn't explain it. Around that same time, I started noticing Carl more often. Always in the hallway when I came home, pretending to fix something, wiping non-existent dust from the wall, or checking his mail at odd hours. One night, he smiled and said, "You must really like that Thai place on Pine Street, huh? You've ordered from there 3 Fridays in a row." I froze. He was right, but how would he know that? Then another day, he casually asked, "Did your sister enjoy her visit last weekend?" My heart sank. She'd only stayed for one night, and I never mentioned it to anyone. The thought that he was somehow watching me started to consume me. So, I decided to install a small security camera above my door. When I told him, his reaction was instant. His face turned red, and he started ranting about privacy and how people these days live in fear for no reason. His voice got louder, sharper, and for the first time, I saw something unhinged in his eyes. It was November 4th, a Monday. I had a late client meeting that went way over time. I got home around 10:15 p.m., exhausted, hungry, ready to crash. But the moment I unlocked the door, I knew something was off. The air felt different, heavier, almost humid. The living room lights were on. I never left them on. My laptop was open on the coffee table, and I knew I had closed it before leaving. There were crumbs on the kitchen counter I hadn't cooked in 2 days. And that smell, cigarettes and musk, strong, invasive, wrong. I walked toward my bedroom, my heart pounding. My jewelry box had been moved, my dresser drawer slightly open. That's when I heard it. A soft thump from somewhere inside the apartment. I froze. Then another sound. The faint creak of wood, like someone shifting their weight. I grabbed a kitchen knife and my phone, calling 911 with trembling fingers. 2 officers arrived within minutes, Officer Price and Officer Avery. They searched the entire apartment, checking windows, closets, under the bed. Nothing. Then Officer Avery crouched near the kitchen sink. "This panel looks off," she said. She tapped on the wood behind the cabinet, and it made a hollow sound. When she pulled it, the backboard swung open on tiny hidden hinges. Behind it was a dark space, a hole carved directly through the drywall, leading straight into the apartment next door, Carl's apartment. The opening was smooth, edges sanded, large enough for someone to crawl through silently. My knees went weak. Officer Price radioed for backup minutes later. The building was swarming with police. They broke into Carl's apartment, where they found him trying to leave through the fire exit with a duffel bag. Inside were things that made my skin crawl. My missing mug, charger, hairbrush, and even a spare key I'd kept hidden in my kitchen drawer. There were also items that weren't mine. Dozens of them. Jewelry, letters, photos of other women. Detective Laura Benton later told me Carl had been unemployed for almost 2 years. The maintenance outfit was fake. He didn't work for the building. He just pretended to. They found notebooks in his apartment filled with details of my daily routine every time I left for work. Every meal I cooked, every call I made. He'd written things like, "She's wearing the blue shirt again, 7:48 a.m. Took a long shower tonight, sang along to Fleetwood Mac. Sister visited, 2 mugs used." They also found a small camera lens hidden in my bathroom drain. I felt sick. The idea that this man had stood inches away from me while I slept, that he'd touched my things, breathed my air, it broke something inside me. Forensic teams found his fingerprints on my bed frame, mirror, even the inside of my closet door. Those nights I woke up with that feeling, like someone was in the room watching me. It wasn't paranoia, it was him. Carl was arrested on multiple charges: burglary, stalking, and invasion of privacy. He pled guilty. Got 8 years, eligible for parole in 5. The landlord tried to downplay everything, even offered me 3 months free rent to avoid legal trouble. I didn't stay. I packed what little I could stand to touch and moved out within a week. I crashed at my friend Olivia's place across town for a month before finding a new apartment. Top floor, corner unit, with no shared walls. This time, I installed my own security system the day I moved in. Cameras, motion sensors, locks that update me through my phone. My friends say I've become paranoid. Maybe they're right. But they didn't see those photos. They didn't see the one where I was asleep, my hair spread across the pillow, while a shadow stood at the edge of my bed, his silhouette caught faintly in the reflection of the mirror behind me. Sometimes, even now, I wake up in the dark and stare at the walls, listening for hollow sounds. Sometimes Milo hisses for no reason. And I wonder, how many others has he watched before me? Detective Benton told me they found similar passages in 2 other buildings Carl had lived in before. Each one sealed up. Nobody knows how many people he spied on. I legally changed my name last year, deleted my social media, started working remotely so I could move whenever I need to. People call it paranoia, I call it survival. Because once you've lived with someone hiding behind your walls, watching you breathe, you never, ever stop checking. I was 26 when I finally bought my first home, something I'd dreamed of since college. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. A small, single-story house on the edge of Brookdale, a quiet suburb about 40 minutes outside Chicago. After years of paying rent for noisy apartments, thin walls, and neighbors who treated midnight like the start of their day, I was desperate for silence, real silence. The house wasn't new by any means. Built sometime in the 1970s, it had faded green siding, cracked steps, and an overgrown backyard with an ancient oak tree that looked like it could whisper secrets if it wanted to. The previous owner had left some junk behind, an old tool chest, faded curtains, and a strange metal wind chime shaped like a human hand. I didn't think much of it. Then I'd been working as an IT field technician for a healthcare company, living off coffee and instant noodles, saving every spare dollar for this moment. The first week in that house felt peaceful. I spent my evenings unpacking, watching TV, and enjoying the quiet hum of the ceiling fan instead of the usual chaos of apartment life. For the first time in years, I slept without hearing anyone else's footsteps, just the soft rustle of the wind through the trees. Until Wednesday morning, when I stepped outside with my coffee, I froze. Across the wooden deck were muddy footprints, big ones, heavy boots, maybe size 11 or 12, starting from the yard, leading straight to my sliding glass door, and then back again. But here's the thing. There hadn't been rain for over 2 weeks. The ground was dry and cracked. There wasn't even a hose leak that could explain mud like that. The footprints were dark reddish-brown, almost clay-like. At first I brushed it off, thinking maybe a confused delivery guy or a lost kid had wandered through my yard. I cleaned it up, made a mental note to buy a security light, and went on with my day. But the next morning, they were back. Same prints, same path, same eerie silence. That second morning, I crouched to look closer. The tread marks were deep and perfectly formed, with diagonal grooves that almost looked like symbols. If you stared long enough, I snapped a few photos and posted them in a local Facebook group, asking if anyone had seen trespassers lately. Most replies were casual. "Get a camera. Probably some kids." But one caught my attention. An elderly woman named Mrs. Givens, who lived 2 streets over, commented, "Be careful. The man who used to own your house left in a hurry. He said someone kept coming back at night. Never told us who." That made my stomach drop. That evening, I installed a bright motion sensor floodlight from Home Depot and sprinkled flour across the deck before bed, something my grandmother used to do in her pantry to catch mice. I figured it might reveal more detail if someone came back. At 2:14 a.m., the floodlight snapped on. The sudden brightness jolted me awake. I rushed to the window. The yard looked empty, just glowing grass and the oak's twisted shadow stretching like a claw. Nothing moved. Not a sound. After 10 uneasy minutes, I went back to bed. But in the morning, the flour told the truth. The same boot prints were there, clearer than before. They stopped right at my sliding door. And then, the pattern changed. The prints shifted, as if the person had stood there for a long time. There were small knee marks where someone had crouched, and thin streaks, like fingers dragged across glass. Right at face level, the flour had been blown away in a perfect oval, like someone had pressed their face against the door. Breathing. They'd been watching me while I slept on the couch. I called the police. The responding officer looked barely older than me. He took notes, checked the yard, and told me it was probably kids messing around. He recommended getting security cameras and left. That afternoon, I drove to Best Buy and dropped nearly $900 on a camera system. 4 night vision cameras with motion alerts linked straight to my phone. I set them up myself. 1 for the front door, 1 on each side, and 1 pointed directly at that damned sliding glass door. That night, I double-locked every door, jammed a broom handle against the sliding frame, and set my phone on the nightstand, showing the live camera grid. Around 11:37 p.m., just as I was drifting off, I heard it. A faint metallic scrape. I glanced at my phone screen and froze. There was a man standing at the sliding door. He was wearing dark gray coveralls, like a mechanic thick boots, the same tread I'd seen in the flour. He wasn't wild or deranged. He looked normal, middle-aged, thinning hair, clean-shaven, calm. He was using something, maybe a screwdriver, to pry at the door. Then he looked up directly at the camera and smiled. I turned on the audio through the app just as he started speaking. His voice was low, steady, almost gentle. "Evan," he whispered. "Evan, open up. You don't belong here." He said my name, but I hadn't told anyone my full name, not even my new neighbors. No mail had arrived yet. No one online knew my new address. Still whispering, he leaned closer to the glass. "You took what wasn't yours, Evan. I just need to show you something." My chest felt tight. I dialed 911, whispering to the dispatcher, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone. The operator told me to stay put. Units were on their way. On the camera feed, the man suddenly stopped mid-sentence, tilted his head like he was listening to something only he could hear. Then he pulled out an old flip phone, checked the screen, and walked off into the darkness beyond the yard. Calm, casual, as if his job there was done. By the time police arrived 6 minutes later, he was gone. They searched the property, took the footage, and promised extra patrols overnight. One officer, Sergeant Landry, asked if I'd ever met anyone by that name, if I had enemies. I didn't. I was a tech nerd with a quiet life. No drama, no feuds. That night, I slept with the lights on. 2 nights later, it happened again. But worse. Around 3 a.m., the side camera pinged an alert. When I opened the feed, there were 2 people. The man in coveralls and someone else. A smaller figure beside him, wearing a hooded raincoat, even though it was a dry, clear night. They stood at the edge of my property, half hidden by the trees, just inside the camera's infrared glow. The man pointed toward the house, toward me, while the hooded figure nodded, listening. Then they both turned, looked straight at the camera, and waved. Slow. Deliberate. I called the police again. While I was on the line, they began walking around to the front. On my screen, they disappeared from one camera and reappeared on another. The hooded figure knelt on my porch and placed something on the welcome mat. Then both of them walked away, hand in hand, like they were taking an evening stroll. Police arrived in under 5 minutes this time. When they checked the porch, they found a manila envelope. My name, Evan, was written on it, in neat, blocky handwriting. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Pictures of me, at work, at the gym, walking into Starbucks, shopping for groceries. Some from the last few days, others clearly months old. And in nearly every single one, they were there too. Those same 2 people in the background. Sometimes barely visible, sometimes staring directly into the lens. They'd been watching me long before I even moved to Brookdale. The detectives dug into the photos. In one shot, taken months earlier, a white Ford Transit van was parked behind me at a gas station. Same van appeared again and again in different photos. They managed to read part of the plate number and traced it to a man named Daniel Mercer. I didn't recognize the name. But when Detective Landry pulled up the file, my blood ran cold. Daniel Mercer was the previous owner of my house. He'd lost it in foreclosure less than a year ago after falling behind on mortgage payments. Neighbors said he'd gone off the deep end, ranting that the bank stole his home and the system was rigged. Then one night, he just vanished. And the woman in the hood? That was his sister, Janice, a former ER nurse who'd lost her license after a psychological breakdown. Police tracked them down to a budget motel 15 miles away. When they entered the room, they found notebooks filled with my personal information. Everything from my work schedule to my car's license plate. They even had a floor plan of my house, labeled with times I usually slept, which windows were best for entry, and notes like, he uses the left mug for coffee. But what chilled me most was one short sentence scribbled across the top of a page. He's living in my house. We have to bring him back. Daniel and Janice were arrested that morning. They refused to explain what bring him back meant. Both were charged with stalking and attempted burglary. Daniel got 18 months, Janice 12, and mandatory treatment. Detective Landry told me they'd found something else too. Something odd. In their motel room on the dresser was a photo of me sleeping on my couch. The timestamp on the file matched the exact night I'd seen Daniel at my sliding door, which meant, before I even called the police, he'd already been inside once. I thought about selling the house after that, but it didn't feel right. Like if I left, I'd be letting him win. So I stayed. I reinforced every door, installed extra locks, bought a security bar, and adopted a German Shepherd mix named Rex, who barked at every falling leaf. For months, things were normal again. Work, walks, sleep. Sometimes I even forgot the faces of Daniel and Janice. Until one foggy night in December, I was watching TV when Rex started growling. Low and deep, staring at the sliding door. I muted the sound. Nothing but the hum of the heater. But on the camera feed, I saw something strange. At the base of the oak tree, half hidden in the mist, hung that metal wind chime I'd found in the garage, the one shaped like a human hand. It was swinging slowly, even though the air was still. And underneath it, fresh, muddy boot prints led straight toward my deck. I never believed a house could hold a soul. At least, not until I moved into the one on Maple Hollow Drive, just outside Boise, Idaho. I bought it in the spring of 2018, nearly 2 years after my wife, Maggie, passed away from lung cancer. Losing her tore everything out of me. The smell of her shampoo in the hallway, her laughter echoing through the kitchen. Every corner of our old home felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by her absence. So when my old college buddy, Ray, a realtor, told me about a small ranch-style house that had just gone on the market, I didn't think twice. "It's perfect for you, Ethan," he'd said. "Quiet neighborhood, big yard, even has a pool, and the price, a steal." I should have known that phrase. A steal usually comes with a reason. The house sat near the edge of town, framed by pine trees and distant mountains. The kind of peaceful American suburb you see in real estate magazines. Bright mailboxes, waving neighbors, lawns trimmed with military precision. But the moment I saw the property, something felt off. The house itself looked fine. Single story, wide front porch, and a backyard that stretched almost to the woods. But there was this old weathered shed at the far edge of the yard, leaning slightly, like it was trying to hide from the world. Ray said the previous owner, an older man named Frank Weaver, had moved to Texas to be closer to family. No one seemed to know much more. I signed the papers a week later. The first few days were uneventful, just unpacking, mowing, fixing a few things here and there. It felt good to work with my hands again, to hear the hum of the mower instead of the silence of an empty house. Then came June 3rd, the day I first noticed it. I was cutting the grass near the shed when my mower dipped suddenly, like the ground had just given up. The earth felt soft, unnaturally soft, and the grass in that one circular area was darker, thicker, almost alive in a strange way. When I pulled the mower back, there was a shallow depression. Not a hole, but the ground had clearly sunk. And then came the smell. It wasn't overpowering at first, just a faint, sour stench, a mix of rot and something chemical. I thought maybe a raccoon or possum had died under there. Happens all the time out here. I left that part alone and decided to check later. But the next afternoon, when the sun hit that patch directly, the smell drifted toward the patio where I was having coffee. It wasn't just decay. It was sweet, heavy, and metallic, like rust and spoiled fruit combined. I started pouring bleach around the spot, thinking it might kill whatever bacteria was causing it. Didn't help. A few days later, my neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, a cheerful widow who'd lived next door for over 25 years, brought over a pie. While chatting, she mentioned something odd. "Frank Weaver was such a perfectionist," she said, wiping her hands. "He'd trim the hedges every Sunday, repaint the fence every spring. But he never touched that corner by the shed, always said it wasn't ready yet. Whatever that means." That phrase stuck with me. Not ready. Yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I stepped outside for some air. The moonlight was pale, the kind that makes shadows look alive. My eyes drifted toward that patch of ground. And I swear, for a split second, I saw something. A faint movement, like the soil itself was breathing. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed a shovel and started digging, just a few inches to see what was under there. The soil was unnervingly loose, easy to push through, almost like it had been disturbed before. About a foot down, it turned from brown to a strange grayish black. Then that smell hit me again, stronger this time, raw and pungent. I kept digging until my shovel hit something solid. It wasn't metal or wood. It gave a dull, thudding sound, soft but firm, like hitting wet leather. I brushed the dirt away and saw a glimpse of thick, yellowed plastic, construction-grade sheeting, wrapped around something long and irregular. At first, I thought it might be old insulation or maybe garden supplies. But the shape underneath was wrong, too human. I froze. My pulse started pounding in my ears. My first instinct was to call 911. But what if it was just garbage? I didn't want to sound like a lunatic. I crouched, peeled a torn edge of the plastic, and instantly gagged. A wave of decay and chemicals slapped me in the face. Inside was a dark, checkered flannel shirt, soaked in stains. And beneath that, something pale and smooth. Like wax, I dropped the shovel, stumbled backward, and vomited in the grass. There was no mistaking it. I'd found a body. The police arrived within 15 minutes. A detective named Lydia Moore, mid-40s with sharp eyes and a calm voice, took charge. She asked me to recount everything while forensic techs swarmed my yard, setting up tents and evidence markers. When I told her about Frank Weaver and Mrs. Callahan's comment, she scribbled it all down in a small leather notebook. "Do you know where Frank is now?" she asked. "Texas," I said. "That's what the realtor told me." She frowned slightly. "We'll check on that." By afternoon, the team had dug deeper and found 2 more bodies, all wrapped the same way. I remember Detective Moore standing silently over the hole for a long time before muttering, "This isn't random." That evening, she showed me old missing person photos from Idaho and neighboring states, a traveling salesman from Montana, a drifter from Portland, a young woman who vanished after hitchhiking through town. Each one gone without a trace, all during the years Frank had lived there. But what came next made my blood run cold. When they checked property records, they found something strange. The house had been sold 5 times since 1992, each time to a single man, always through quick cash transactions, always at a lower price than it should have been. And each owner had left abruptly, moving out of state, new job, family emergency. None ever stayed longer than 6 years. It was like the house was being passed along, owner to owner, like a secret. 2 days later, the FBI got involved. They tore the property apart, digging up the backyard, scanning the ground with radar, breaking through concrete slabs. They found 4 more. Total, 7 bodies. 1 was under the shed foundation. 2 more were beneath the garage floor. 1 had been buried so long, even the bones had turned gray. They found a metal box inside the shed, rusted and sealed with duct tape. Inside were journals, handwritten notes by different people, spanning decades. The writing changed every few years, but the content didn't. Each entry described preparations, deliveries, and cleanups. Some used initials, others code names, but everyone mentioned the Circle. That's what they called themselves. When the agents traced the last entry, it matched Frank Weaver's handwriting. They checked his Texas address. It didn't exist. 3 weeks later, they found him, living in Vancouver, Canada, under the name Charles Denton. He'd dyed his hair gray and lost nearly 30 pounds. He didn't resist arrest. When asked about the house, he smiled and said, "I was just keeping it ready. It's not my place to stop the work." Those words haunted everyone in that room. the media went wild. The Maple Hollow murders. Reporters crowded the street for weeks. My house became a crime scene, a symbol of horror hiding in plain sight. When the investigation ended, I packed up and left. The agency refunded everything, probably afraid I'd sue. I moved into a small apartment downtown. No yard, no shed, no silence. Frank Weaver got multiple life sentences. During his trial, he finally revealed the truth. There wasn't just one house. There were dozens. Homes scattered across the country, owned and managed by people within this secret group, passing properties between themselves for years. Each location had one purpose: to hide what shouldn't be found. He claimed they'd been doing it since the 1970s. When the FBI asked how many there were, he only said, "More than you'd ever want to believe. Some of them are probably for sale right now." That was nearly 4 years ago. I still can't look at real estate listings without feeling sick. Every time I see a cozy suburban home with a great deal, my stomach tightens. Sometimes late at night, I check missing person databases online. Not because I want to, but because I can't stop. I look for patterns, clusters, gaps, and every now and then, I stumble on a listing for an old house in another quiet town. Sold quickly, buyer unknown, cash deal. And I wonder if somewhere, right now, another lonely man is mowing his new lawn and smelling something strange in the wind. When I first saw the listing, it felt like a sign from God. A 2-bedroom home with a fenced backyard, hardwood floors, and a price that almost seemed impossible for the area. Just outside Boulder, Colorado. After the divorce, I'd been hunting for months for a decent place for my daughter, Lena, and me. She's 7, full of energy, and deserved more than the cramped 1-bedroom apartment where sirens screamed every night and walls smelled like someone else's cooking. So when I met the landlord, a frail man named Mr. Callahan, with a gentle smile and trembling hands, I didn't think twice. He said he'd owned the place for nearly 30 years. Told me how the last family stayed for a long time, and how kids always loved that backyard. The rent was $300 below market value, which should have been my first red flag. But as a single mom working double shifts at a dental clinic, I didn't have the luxury to be suspicious. We moved in late July, the kind of summer heat that makes everything smell like dust and asphalt. Lena ran through every room barefoot, naming them like they were new friends. Mom's room, my room, and the mystery closet. Her bedroom window faced the backyard, where an old oak tree stretched wide branches over a rusted swing set. She said she loved it because the tree looks like it's guarding us. That first night, she fell asleep hugging her stuffed giraffe, and I remember sitting in the living room with a glass of cheap wine, finally feeling peace for the first time in months. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish and new paint. The walls were quiet, too quiet. After years downtown, silence felt unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. It started small. Monday morning, when I opened the front door to grab the paper, I noticed 6 cigarette butts neatly arranged on the porch in a curved line, all the same brand, Camel Golds. Beside them sat 2 empty beer bottles, the labels peeled off completely, like someone had done it nervously, strip by strip. At first, I laughed it off. Teenagers, I muttered. Maybe they were hanging out after curfew and picked my porch as a spot to smoke. But the next morning, it happened again. This time, 8 butts, 3 bottles, and a crumpled 7-Eleven receipt. The timestamp read 2:18 a.m., and the items bought made my stomach turn. Rope duct tape, flashlight batteries I called the non-emergency police line. The officer on the other end sounded half asleep and told me they'd send a cruiser to patrol at night. That was it. So, I installed a Ring doorbell camera that same day, my hands trembling while screwing it into place. By Friday night, things turned from strange to terrifying. Lena had a mild fever, so I gave her medicine and tucked her in around 8 o'clock. I remember her whispering, "Mommy, can you keep the light on tonight?" The tree looks different. I left her bedside lamp on and went to fold laundry while watching some baking competition on TV. Around 9:30, I heard it. A slow, heavy breathing sound outside Lena's window. It wasn't wind. It wasn't a raccoon. It was too deliberate. 3 breaths. Pause. Then one long exhale that fogged the window. My blood ran cold. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept behind my door, a leftover from my ex's softball days, and crept down the hallway barefoot. Lena was still asleep, her little body rising and falling peacefully. The breathing was still there. Closer. And then came the sound of fingertips dragging across the screen, slow and deliberate, like someone testing its strength. Through a tiny gap in the curtains, I saw the shape of a man, tall, shoulders hunched, wearing what looked like a dark baseball cap. He wasn't breaking in. He was just standing there, watching, breathing. I froze, my phone in one hand, the bat in the other. Then I heard the gravel crunch under his boots as he moved, around the side of the house, toward my bedroom window. The motion light flicked on, washing the side yard in a harsh white glare. The figure didn't run. He just walked faster, like he already knew exactly where to go. Next came the sound that made my stomach twist, the back door handle turning, then the front knob, then the sliding patio door, rattling slightly in its track. He was testing every entry, every single one. That's when I finally dialed 911. The dispatcher told me officers were 5 minutes away. I moved quietly through the hallway, locking windows, whispering updates. Then I saw him. Through the peephole, a man maybe in his 40s, dark jacket, rough beard, baseball cap low over his face. His expression wasn't angry. He looked calm, almost curious. He leaned closer to my door, inspecting the locks like a puzzle. And then he spoke. His voice was soft, almost conversational. Greater than, "I know you're awake, Heather." Hearing my name hit me like a punch. "Your breathing changed when you heard me. You stopped folding that towel, the one with the blue whales, right?" My throat went dry. He was right. I had been folding a blue whale towel when I first froze. He'd been watching me for days, maybe weeks. "You always check your daughter's forehead with the back of your hand," he whispered. "Not your palm. Sweet girl looks like you when she frowns. Pretty name, too. Lena." I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My hands were shaking so hard the phone nearly slipped. "You locked all the doors, but you forgot one," he said. "The bathroom window, small one above the tub." My heart nearly stopped. The tiny window had a broken latch I kept meaning to fix. I ran, barefoot, into the bathroom. Sure enough, the latch hung uselessly. And as I reached up to close it, fingers appeared. Thin, dirty fingers curling over the edge. Pushing it open, I slammed my palm down, trapping them. He hissed, pulling back. And then his face appeared through the glass. Gaunt, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, smile cracked and yellow. "You're smart," he whispered. "But I've already been inside." He laughed softly. "Last weekend, when you took your girl to the park, I laid on your bed, smelled your pillow. Lavender shampoo, right? Oh, and you should really fix that smoke detector in the hall. It chirped all afternoon while I was here. Then, sirens." He tilted his head, listening. "Coming down Maple Ridge Avenue. You've got maybe a minute. I'll be patient." I always am. And then, he vanished. When police arrived, I could barely breathe. 2 officers swept the property, while another stayed inside with me, asking questions I could barely answer. They found boot prints by Lena's window, cigarette butts by the fence, and something wedged behind the garbage cans. A small black notebook inside were pages of handwritten notes. Lights off at 10:43 p.m. Kid takes medicine around 8 a.m. Mother checks all locks twice. Bathroom window latch broken. The last entry, written that same day, said, "Tonight after the medicine." That line made my knees buckle. The police filed a report, took fingerprints, and promised extra patrols. But the man was gone. We spent the next week in a cheap motel on the highway. Lena thought it was a mini vacation. She never saw the fear in my face when I checked the locks 5 times a night. When I finally told Mr. Callahan I wanted to terminate the lease, his expression fell. After a long silence, he admitted something that made me sick. The previous tenants hadn't stayed for years, like he said. They'd moved out after 5 months, claiming someone was watching them through the windows. He said he thought they were paranoid, painted the walls, lowered the rent, moved on. The house across the street. 2 weeks later, detectives called. They'd found where he'd been staying. A foreclosed property 2 streets over, no furniture. Just a mattress on the floor and the walls covered with photos. Photos of me and Lena, eating breakfast, watching TV. Lena brushing her doll's hair, dozens of them. They said he'd been using a telephoto lens, hiding in the abandoned house at night. He had our routines written down, even what brand of coffee I drank, what time the lights went off, when I checked the mail. But that wasn't all. When they searched his car, they found 2 more notebooks from other towns, other women, single mothers, each one with pages of notes, schedules, habits, favorite meals. Some of the women had filed complaints before they vanished. Others never knew they were being watched at all. The detective's voice cracked slightly when she said, "You're lucky, Heather. You and your daughter got away." But I didn't feel lucky. I felt marked, because luck runs out eventually. It's been 9 months. We live in Fort Collins now, in a newer house with motion sensors, cameras, alarms, everything money can buy. Lena's back in school. She laughs again. But sometimes, when the house gets quiet, I hear that voice in my head. Calm, steady, whispering through the glass. "You're smart, but I've been as..." And I check the windows. Every night. Even though this house doesn't have a bathroom window above the tub, I still look. Because he said something before he left that night that I can't stop replaying. "I'll see you again. Maybe next week. Maybe next year. I've got time." And I believe him, because when I open the Ring app now, sometimes, right before the camera clicks on, I see a faint reflection. A man in a baseball cap, standing just out of reach, watching.